So, hello everyone, welcome to Violet Cause channel. We've got a bit of a special event going on today. I have my friend Alan James Heath from the Taste My Game Face podcast on. We're not here to talk about... Hello, there he is. We're not here to talk about video games, but what are we here to talk about, Alan?
We're here to talk about Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and I guess about how divisive it is as a film. More specifically, but we'll get into that.
It's going to be spicy memes, I think. I think it's probably worth getting into the sort of kickoff on this. How do you feel about Star Wars overall? Are you a big fan of it? Is it something you cherish?
Yeah, I guess Star Wars has sort of been a relatively big part of my life since I was a kid. Watching the films, haven't gone as far as expanded universe novels and stuff like that, but definitely films, video games, and the cartoons I've enjoyed. And generally I would say I'm a big fan of Star Wars, but that's balanced with just liking good movies as well. So that sort of affects my opinion of this one.
The thing is, I've always come at it from a bit of a strange angle. When I was growing up, I had some friends who were very into it. And I was always, much in the same way you're saying, just about liking good films. It was always something that was around. My parents watched it and stuff like that. We had the VHSs and stuff. But I was always kind of more of a Star Trek guy when I was very young. And then as I've grown older and more, sort of developed more of a critical appreciation of things, Star Wars actually came to make more and more sense to me. Even though, Star Trek 2 Wrath of Khan is in my top 10 films of all time. And I don't actually think one of the Star Wars films is, but I haven't looked at that for a while.
Oh.
I know, controversial. I just love that film, the sort of Shakespearean grandeur, if I want to get too pretentious about it. But anyway, so Last Jedi came out in December. You saw it more or less roughly around the time it was released, right?
I went to the midnight showing of it.
Damn.
Opening night. So...
Because I saw it yesterday.
I guess that's showing the level of Star Wars fan I am. That Star Wars films are the only ones that I've seen as midnight showings.
I saw it at 12:30 yesterday afternoon, and I had the entire cinema to myself. I don't even think one of the sort of ushers came in at one point. It was great. That's one reason why I love going to see sort of films at that time. So, did you like The Force Awakens?
I enjoyed it for just it being more Star Wars. It's a very flawed film that the more I've seen it, the more flaws I see. But I think coming out of it initially, my reaction was just, yeah, it's pretty good. It's all right. It's more Star Wars. The cheese is a bit much, and it's pretty much a remake of A New Hope. But as it's better than the prequels, and I think at that point that's all I wanted.
I think the thing that I felt about it, that I bought into the whole New Hope thing. Which was something I actually quite resented about it. I think it was a review that the Nostalgia Critic did when Force Awakens came out. He had a theory that in some ways it was Disney trying to prove to fans that they could make something like the original film. So it was almost like a sort of show them trying to sort of clean the slate a little bit and say, yes, after everything that went wrong with the prequels, we have a better idea of how this is working. And it is a strange way of going into a new trilogy to do that. But I think that's kind of a tenuous theory, but it does make some sense to me. In terms of my own feelings about Force Awakens, I hated Rey and I hated Kylo. I just found them both infuriating characters. I like John Boyega a lot. I thought he was a really good addition. Chewbacca's always awesome, so there's always that. Han was great. I kind of say I hate it and I dislike it more and more when I think about it over time, but ultimately I just was very deflated by it. I didn't care that much. And then Rogue One came along, and I adored Rogue One. I named it my number one film of 2016, largely because it was daring to be a different type of Star Wars film. So I think that's kind of where I've come into The Last Jedi.
Well, I think that's actually one of the things that, when thinking about the comparison between all three films, because the comparisons of when you're first coming out the cinema and your reaction, how you feel about the film. When I came out of Force Awakens, all three I saw midnight showings, and Force Awakens I just thought, it was pretty fun. It was all right. More Star Wars. It was nice having the theme tune and the big Star Wars on the screen for first time in a long time. That was fun. And just the experience of it being Star Wars again was fun. Rogue One came out, and my reaction was, I think this might be my new favourite Star Wars film. But then Last Jedi, my reaction was, I don't know how to feel about that. It was, and then spending the entire ride home talking about everything I thought was wrong with it. So
oh my God.
I don't think that's a great position to be in when you come out of a film and think, oh, but if they did this instead of that, and that bit was really annoying, and that was a bit shit. It's like, not a great reaction for me. But yeah, I do think Rogue One was one that I don't necessarily think it is, on hindsight, the best Star Wars film, but I do think it's on par with the original. But also being new and daring and making a Star Wars film for the fans that grew up with Star Wars rather than for kids, I think was the new interesting thing they did with it. Whereas as much as a lot of the comments on Last Jedi are that people don't like it because it's being new and interesting, I don't think it is. And I actually think it plays it a bit too safe while also just being freaking weird.
Okay, so you don't actually think The Last Jedi is as daring as some people say it is? Is that sort of...
No.
You don't think it is?
A lot of the film for me is taking scenes from original trilogy stuff and saying, okay, we're going to do this scene again, but what if this happened?
Have you got an example of that? More specific example, or...?
We'll do the throne room scene again. But
of
what
course.
if
yeah, absolutely.
we killed the Emperor pretty quickly? We're gonna do the Hoth scene again, but what if they just failed? And it's a lot of stuff like that. I'm finding I can just go through, like, thinking about it more, I can just go through a lot of the film and say, this is that scene, this is that, and it's the only new stuff in it was the stuff I thought was just confused. Like all the casino stuff was a bit too prequely for me.
Yeah, that was very odd. I'd managed to avoid a lot of the discussion on Last Jedi, obviously before, because I hadn't seen it basically, and also because a lot of the debate just seemed to be absolutely hysterical, and I just was like, don't have the energy for this. But stuff like the casino was something that I was aware was a point of contention, and yeah, those. It was like a side quest, basically. If you're playing if it was a video game, it's a side quest that's not, even though it's crucial to the plot in terms of like, well, actually, no, in ways it's not crucial to the plot because they don't deactivate the light speed beacon, do they? At the end,
they don't accomplish anything.
Yeah, it's completely irrelevant. So it is. Yeah, I do agree with that. I think that was a bit of a distraction, but in terms of the fact, I don't really resent it in hindsight. I just do feel that there was no real need for it. But I think a lot of the things with Last Jedi that I kind of appreciated were the character development aspects. And if nothing else, it was interesting to try and get some way of building more of a rapport between Rose and Finn and sort of establishing what she can do as a character. So I think, it's a pretty useless part of the film, but it's a part that at least has something it can contribute in terms of character development, even if it's not a huge amount.
But I think that's almost one of the things that makes it worse for me is the fact that it's this entire story tangent that seems absolutely pointless, with the exception of being there for character development, to develop a new character that didn't do anything. And with a film that's 2.5 hours long and being feeling incredibly rushed, incredibly quickly paced, to have a whole section of the film that narratively is completely pointless, and for character it just develops a character that doesn't do anything, it made it even worse for me. It's just, I feel like that whole sequence probably may have even been improved if Poe had been the one to go with Finn, or if Rose, if Poe didn't exist in the story and it was Rose instead, because it got to the point where there were too many characters that they were juggling, and they were introducing new characters, all of which seemed like they didn't really add anything to the plot or the story. I think with regards to Poe possibly being involved in a sequence like that or a part like that, because I didn't like Poe in Force Awakens. I just found him just kind of this almost swinging dick that just didn't appeal to me in any way. I think his frustration was a big part of
his development in The Last Jedi, and I like that. So I think the fact that he was the one who couldn't go on the casino side quest, I think that actually plays quite well into what the story's trying to say, because it's frustrating his idea of himself as like essentially the Han Solo, you know, the flyboy, the, you know, sort of the action Saturday morning sort of cartoon hero, if you want to sort of go in that extreme description of it. So I think in some ways that worked. I mean, okay, so let's try and break this up a little bit.
Okay.
What did you like about The Last Jedi?
See, this is something that's getting tougher and tougher.
Yeah.
I think there are elements of the Rey, Luke, and Rey and Kylo stuff that was good. Cinematography with parts was great. There are some really beautiful shots that have really well choreographed sort of fight scenes in it, and that kind of stuff was good. But most of the plot I didn't like, and I thought a lot of it just felt a bit muddled and bipolar.
Nice.
In a way.
Yeah, I do. Again, in terms of reflection, even in the short time I've had to sort of think about it, I was really stumped about how suddenly the First Order was suddenly in charge of the galaxy again.
Yeah.
Like,
who knows?
Like,
I mean, they had their magic weapon that just destroyed apparently all of the Republic's planets in the last one that were all in one comfortable line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a bit of an oversight in terms of a sort of galactic security.
Yeah.
You should have thought about spacing it out a little bit more. And that's the thing, maybe. Isn't it? You've got this immense, you know, sort of billions of stars in a galaxy, and you just put all of your most important societal structures in one part.
Yeah.
So yeah, that stuff was a bit annoying, and you know, the whole thing about the cruisers just being out of range. It kind of thought they were going for trying to go for like a submarine warfare kind of thing, but it's like,
I can see that
the Empire, the First Order, going back through thousands of years of the Star Wars canon, the bad guys would have thought of that. They would have thought, we don't have cruisers that are as fast or as light as the enemy ones. How would we deal with them at sublight speed? It's like, well, we've got all this mind-bending space-age technology, but they're just outside of our cannon ranges. It's like...
Yeah. Just the concept of, let's send a ship ahead and cut them off.
Yeah.
Doesn't come to mind at all, apparently. They're reveling in the idea of slowly killing them without really thinking about the idea of giving them time to come up with a plan or anything like that. It's I don't know why that whole thing existed. It's just, I don't know. Again, for a film that was the longest Star Wars film by about half an hour, if not more, to have stuff like that where it's just, this is just really slow and nothing is happening in a way to sort of build frustration deliberately. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what that whole thing was trying to accomplish. Because even just talking about what you were saying about the frustration that Poe is feeling through a lot of his, you know, his dealings with, is it Holdo? The new...
Laura Dern, yeah. Holdo.
Yeah, Laura Dern's character. His frustration of not being told what's going on and the whole, like, teaching him a lesson. And I don't know, like, that just made that entire situation frustrating, because I found myself siding with Poe in that.
Yeah.
I didn't side with Laura Dern thinking like, he needs to be taught a lesson by anything. I was just like, tell him the plan. Why didn't you just tell him the plan? Why is this a secret plan?
He's still one of the senior officers in the fleet now.
Yeah.
It's like, he still needs to know what's going on.
He's still a captain. Wasn't he demoted to captain?
Yeah.
From commander.
Right.
He's still a captain.
Yeah.
He should still be told what's going on. There is no part of that plan that was like, so like, oh, we can't tell people that are even reasonably senior officers. They're still, you know, it's, the plan would work if she told him, if they'd made it more, you know, so all of the senior officers knew what was going on. It just felt like she was deliberately withholding that information just to be annoying to him.
It's pretty weak. It is pretty weak storytelling. narratively, like in terms of plot and stuff. This is the thing. It's the sort of thing I hadn't thought about once I'd seen it, because I came out of the film kind of like really impressed, especially because I've been comparing it in my head to Force Awakens. So it's the sort of thing I have had this little bit of time to reflect on. I'm just like, yeah, that's actually kind of stupid. But in terms of like senior officers and stuff, one of the things I genuinely liked about Force Awakens was General Hux, because I like Donald Gleason as an actor anyway. I think he's amazing in whatever he does. I really find him chilling in Force Awakens, and yet in Last Jedi he came this sort of snivelling, like he was one of the he suddenly started acting like one of the officers that Darth Vader kills in Empire Strikes Back. You know, he was suddenly this sort of weasel rather than just this sort of fanatic. He's a comedy villain now. Yeah.
They fully turned him into a comedy villain.
Yeah.
I don't get it. My hope for his character that he would essentially be like a young Grand Moff Tarkin. Yeah. That was his career path in a way, that he would be, you know, because when you look at the original films, Grand Moff Tarkin, a very intimidating character, and also had Vader on a short leash. So Vader respected him. But in this, it's just like, they're just two whiny kids that are competing for power. It's just one's can punch harder than the other. So it just turns into, it's a bit of a joke. Especially with the opening, the whole opening sequence.
On hold.
Yeah, it's like, oh great, Hux. 90s phone humor in a Star Wars movie. Like, okay, I mean, this just generally being a, you know, something I could probably mention throughout in terms of the humor. Something that I can't say it's something I came up with, but I have heard someone saying that I haven't seen The Last Jedi, but Spaceballs 2 was really good.
I mean, there were moments in the film I actually found myself chuckling at. I mean, that bit with being on hold went on way too long, but the first time he said it, I actually did genuinely chuckle. And there were little moments throughout the film like that, but nothing that I could really sort of latch onto as like an iconic sort of moment of light relief in the film. So yeah, that was a bit annoying, but
it's a lot of it is just sort of kind of laughing out of disbelief is what I found myself doing.
Yeah.
Kind of laughing at a lot of the humour, but just out of like, why the hell is this here? Who wrote this in this movie? This is the stuff that you put in a Robot Chicken special. You know, this isn't the kind of thing I normally expect from a mainline Star Wars film, for it to take the piss out of itself while it's happening.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I didn't understand it all. And the whole Rey reach out with your feelings, no, not with your hand, with your feelings sort of thing, you know, it's, I don't know, I felt it's at the moment it was just confusion, but then over time it's just been infuriation about why any of that was in there. But yeah, I mean, going back to that scene, even just that opening part, not only the hold call moment being a bit of, you know, kind of what, this is a bit ridiculous to be in here, but then quickly followed by Poe, the best pilot in the world, takes out all of the cannons on this ship single-handedly. He doesn't need anyone else. But yeah, just that sequence where it's just sort of, as you say, sort of the flyboy cartoon character that is Poe, kind of just single-handedly doing a lot of the work without really anyone else's help, is kind of a bit too much for me. In a way, I don't know. I want my characters to be flawed, but his only flaw is he's a bit too cocky. But they've given him reason to be cocky by making him the best pilot in the whole damn galaxy. You know.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, Han Solo, you know, people considered him to be, well, no, actually, he considered himself to be the best pirate in the galaxy. Yeah. But then when there were genuine moments where he like screwed up or bumbled or something, it was genuinely humanizing. You know, like the moment was it in Empire where the tools fall on his head when he's trying to fix the Falcon. That's a genuinely like well written sort of little moment you can add in to not only just sort of add a moment of light relief, but also build up a better idea of the character. But I mean, that's the thing though. I still preferred Poe in this film to Force Awakens. I still found him a little more interesting, and I have to say that I thought Rey came on quite nicely in Last Jedi. I thought it's a pretty cliched sort of journey she's on, because she's obviously basically on the same journey Luke was on, just coming at it from a slightly more sort of darker angle.
It's another bit. What if Luke went to Yoda, but Yoda refused to train him, and then they had to train, and Luke had to chase after Yoda more than just one scene's worth of convincing him. That's
okay.
In that whole sequence.
So that's all right. Let's get into this then. Do you know who Henry Walsh is?
No.
Henry Walsh is the gentleman who set up the petition that I think is still attracting signatures to get Disney to strike Episode 8 from the canon and remake it. And I think, from what I remember, a lot of the motivation behind that was because of what this film does to Luke Skywalker. For me personally, a darker... No, not necessarily a darker, but a more cynical, disillusioned and world-wearied Luke kind of made sense to me. And it was also, I did think it was an interesting concept. Now, whether or not it was executed in the best way, I still think it was... I appreciate that. In terms of going back to what I was saying about, especially Rogue One, trying to do something different, not being entirely beholden to the past. And obviously the film's entire theme of learning from mistakes and, tearing down and, not taking things for granted. I actually really liked what they were trying to do with Luke, but do you think really overall what they were doing worked?
No.
No.
So I'm in a similar place where I do think that was a great idea for him being disillusioned and him separating himself from the Force because of his drastic failure at the school and his failure with Kylo. Like maybe coming into training Kylo as being really overconfident, like, hey, I'm the guy that pulled Darth Vader back from the dark side. I can do anything. And then that happening with Kylo and just being like, well, fuck. I failed this drastically. And then sort of falling into a pit of despair in that way. That's interesting. And I just don't think it was executed very well. Especially not with his weird adventure. I don't know. His weird, island adventure that he had when you first meet him.
Yeah.
That was a bit strange. He's swigging the milk from the teat, as it were.
Yeah, that was kind of... I'm not sure... I don't know, maybe there's something on 8chan or something. There's some fan fiction that explains that in context. I don't know. That sort of whole thing on the island was actually reminding me sort of some of the parts of The Force Awakens I didn't like, particularly when we first meet Rey and she's on that planet. She's, buying, doing salvage to get bread and stuff. Just all the little, the weird lizard nun things that were around. It's just like, this, what?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's not isolated. He's not in the most remote part of the galaxy. He's actually in a place that you would think that Snoke, whoever the fuck Snoke is, he clearly has a good comprehension of the Force and the history of the Jedi and the Sith and everything. So you'd think people would know about this place, even if they just appreciate it as a myth. They would know where this island of the Jedi is, where the tree is, and where the books of wisdom are. You'd think it wouldn't actually be the best place for him to go. At least Obi-Wan Kenobi went off into the middle of the fucking desert. He went to one of the most useless, out-of-the-way planets in the galaxy to disappear. Yeah. And yet Luke goes to where the Jedi come from.
Well, he went to... what he went to was a hidden temple. That's what my take from it was.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe I missed a piece of information there, but I assumed this is an old ancient temple that hasn't been used or heard of for a long time.
Yeah.
Because it being a very out of the way one, that's why he went there, as opposed to maybe going to Jeddah, because Jeddah from Rogue One is where the Jedi originate from, because the city there was supposed to be their Mecca. So it's that's sort of the big famous one that's no longer there.
Yeah.
But then this was more, I assumed it was a more out of the way one. So that makes sense. But yeah, the fact that it's also inhabited by a bunch of random frog nuns was a bit odd. And it, again, just sort of adding that weird comic relief where it didn't need it.
Yeah, not particularly good comic relief either.
Yeah. That's the whole film. But it's the part of that bipolar nature of it where they were trying to do some more serious stuff on that island with Rey and Luke, but you would have more serious moments just cut in half by a frog appearing, Luke being weird for no reason, or, showing Kylo Ren's boobs. It just kept sort of... it's almost like it didn't want to get too serious, and anytime it like felt like it had gone, maybe we've been serious for 30 seconds, we have to do a joke, sort of thing. This is a kids movie, we can't take it to that level of serious without putting a joke in there to break the ice or whatever. Ended up breaking.
Which is, very. That is not in keeping with the tradition of Star Wars at all. I know I've said before, like, I'm not so bothered about being sort of beholden to what's gone in the past in terms of the canon and the film series itself, but it is a thing that generally annoys me, particularly with sort of films that are framed as being for kids, is that you can give kids sort of young audiences a lot more credit, and that was one thing, especially something like Empire Strikes Back did. It did say that, this is a film that kids are definitely going to enjoy, but we're going to freeze a man in carbonite. Someone's going to get their hand chopped off. You don't constantly need to try and sort of throw in these goofy little elements. You can respect children enough to appreciate a story just as it is. So I kind of agree on that idea of just like, we've got to throw in something now. That doesn't, that's a real black mark against it. And then of course, I didn't have a problem with the porgs, but I found them quite easy to ignore. But that whole bit where Chewbacca's like cooking one of them, I would have been happy with him to start eating it, but at the same time, like, what was that whole sequence for? Like,
I don't know.
Chewbacca wasn't in the film enough for me. But to be fair, I wish Chewbacca would be in quite a few more films, even ones that aren't even set in the Star Wars universe. But I mean, Dunkirk would have been I like Dunkirk, but that would have been a much more fascinating film if Wookiees had been on the beach. But that's the thing. Well, at least merchandising. I mean, it is Star Wars. I'm not really going to sort of hold it against that. That's what Star Wars is about. But I get what you mean. There are all these little weird, tweaky, kooky elements that were just like
the porgs as a whole, I didn't mind them. They're fine. I mean, it's the new Ewoks. They just needed something cute to sell. It's the toy merchandising there, but it got to the point where whenever there was a shot on the island, there was a porg somewhere in that shot. Like anytime there was some sort of panning scenery, you just see one flying over and just hear it. They couldn't go one moment without it. But it's I don't know, I thought they were fine, but as you say, it's just sort of, they felt like they were used particularly with Chewie as just the insert joke moments, to kind of, we need a joke every such and such time. They felt like a big part of that. And the whole bit with Chewie eating the porg, I think I probably would have preferred it if he just ate it. That would have been a more interesting bit there. But again, that was fine. If it was quicker and it was a bit more of a quicker joke, that would have been better. But I didn't mind them that much. They weren't something that I came away hating. They were just like, there's porgs. That's fine.
I think in terms of Chewbacca himself, I mean, towards the end where he's piloting the Millennium Falcon and Rey's on the cannons and stuff, I really liked that, because one thing I actually really hoped with the death of Han Solo is that I actually would like a lot more sort of development of Chewbacca becoming like the captain of the Millennium Falcon. I'd actually like it. Like, obviously, like, he was deferring to Rey a lot in this film, and I was kind of like, I'd actually kind of like him to be. I mean, there's only so much you can be assertive with a character who you can't actually understand what he's saying. But that little flash of that near the end where he was just sort of like owning it. That's kind of hopefully I'd like to see in the next film. I want to see more Chewbacca, and I want to see how they can actually play with him as a character. Without him having to just defer to someone else, because I really don't want him to defer to Rey. I don't want her to become the captain. Because that was kind
she
of
should be his co-pilot.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's I'd like that. I think that's a good way for things to go. You mentioned the fan service with Kylo Ren. All rugged and oiled and shirtless and stuff. That whole thing about the two of them talking to each other via Force Skype or whatever it was. I didn't like that. That I kind of get. No, actually, no. I don't think it worked at all. Actually, I think cinematically you could have been a lot more interesting with it. You could have been more like flashes, visions, things like that. Not just turning and then talking to each other as if you're in the same room. I thought that was quite cheap. I thought that was just really, really forced.
I didn't mind it that much. I think the reason for why it was happening ended up feeling like it was a bit of a cop-out. Just in terms of, I think I would have preferred it if there was some weird link between them. Like the Force had linked them together in some strange way, rather than it just being Snoke that had done it.
Yeah. Because
apparently Snoke, not knowing where someone is, can link their mind to some other person.
What?
It's, yeah.
It's
like he has no idea where this planet is. He has no idea where she is, but he can, he doesn't have her phone number, but he can somehow bring her up on Skype.
Yeah.
And connect her to someone else, and it's
I like what happened to Snoke, because I like that he's been built up as like the big bad, and then they did like take him out in a way that was actually quite surprising. I liked the surprise of the fact that they killed him. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't actually seen the film yet. Just left that a bit later. It's really about 30 minutes in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm glad he's gone, because I'd never liked him as a villain at all. But at the same time, I still feel a bit cheap and like sort of left. I feel a bit cheap that I'm just like, well, what was the point of all of that? Like him as a character, what his influence was, why?
Yeah, I mean, my impression of Snoke was, as much as I didn't necessarily care that much about him in the first one, but I wanted this film to make me care about him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's my feeling as well.
And instead, it just turned him into another comedy villain.
Yeah.
Whereas, so if he turns up, plays with Rey for a bit, and then gets killed incredibly easily, even just to the point where it's, I thought this guy was supposed to be powerful. I guess he wasn't really, because it was that easy to take him out. So he must not actually have been that powerful. But it still leaves hanging in the air just the whole question of where did he come from?
Yeah. Because clearly he must have been even if he's not like a genuine Sith Lord, he's someone obviously in the tradition. He's someone who has enormous knowledge and experience with the Force. So if you take the beloved rule of two into account, was like the Emperor hiding did he have another sort of backup apprentice or something? Or was it like with the Force Unleashed games, was Vader training Snoke in like private or something? It's like, oh yeah, by the way, we've defeated the Empire. I'm glad there's no more incredibly powerful Sith people around. And then, whoops, here we go, this guy.
Yeah, I mean, because that's one of the things. I think the one of the biggest theories was he was going to be Darth Plagueis, who was Emperor Palpatine's
his
mentor. Yeah. And he had figured out a way to come back from the dead using the Force, so that would be a feasible connection for him. But
I did hear a rumor that he was actually Jar Jar Binks. I did actually see that one floating around after Force Awakens. They were like, Jar Jar Binks had sort of disappeared into the deepest, darkest part of the galaxy to become a Sith Lord. Which I would have liked, actually. I would have really liked that to have been the reveal. Just like...
would have been a definitely interesting twist.
These are on the dark side. No, that would have been... Actually, that probably would have made the film even better. But, yeah.
I mean, it would have made it go full Spaceballs for me, but...
Well, yeah, exactly.
I mean, this is me coming from the side of being a Star Wars fan, and I guess how that may affect my side of it, or maybe how my opinion differs from a lot of the really hating Star Wars fans that are disliking it just because it's not exactly what they wanted. I don't necessarily care. I don't care that much if this was a particular character we've known before, but I think it's just the fact that we've been left hanging with this essentially gap in plot for anyone that has seen the old films, and to them this is a continuation.
Yeah,
where you had the Empire. You've got the New Order. So, okay, the New Order came about from the remains of the Empire. They've just got stronger in the background. Fair enough. But this random character that is in control of them all and managed to, supersede Luke in taking over his disciple, where did he come from? Like, was he hiding in the background? he couldn't have just appeared out of nowhere. There must be something else to that. How someone can just come out of nowhere and take over this big, powerful organization. And as much as I didn't care, as I say, about it being someone we already knew about, I still want to know more about that. Exactly where he came from, because that just feels like a big plot hole at this point.
Yeah.
That unfortunately is probably just going to be answered in a comic or something rather than in a film where it should be.
I think actually I think they release visual dictionaries every year. They did it for Force Awakens and they've done it for Last Jedi. And I'm sure I read somewhere that a lot of this stuff is actually filled in the Last Jedi visual dictionary.
But
what's the point?
Yeah.
Well, I know what the point is, money. But
that's the thing. If you're filling in plot in additional materials like that, then you obviously haven't written your film very well.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
And that's I mean that is sort of really, really cheap tactics.
Yeah,
not uncommon tactics, but still pretty shitty, especially when there is an enormous sort of the enormous care and enormous devotion. And you shouldn't be limited by fan expectations. You shouldn't be afraid to defy what you think the fans are going to want. But at the same time, you do need to have respect, not even just for the faithful, but just for audiences in general. You need to have the basic respect to fill in the gaps, or at least explain just enough for things to sort of come together neatly.
But I mean, I also even just come back in terms of fan expectation stuff like that. That comes into Rey's lineage.
Yeah,
and that I know was a big sticking point for haters of this movie. But again, that's something that I didn't really mind.
No, I was fine.
It fully makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone they could have chosen to be her parentage that would appease fans in any way. There'd always be, it'd either be too convenient or it'd be too random. So it's if she comes from nothing, that actually is far more in keeping with Star Wars lineage, because Anakin Skywalker came from nothing, and that's where it all started. So having that again is in keeping with Star Wars as the way it's told its story up till now. So that was fine to me.
I think it would be quite interesting to sort of, at least for me, to sort of look into how fans who are familiar with the original extended universe stories appreciate this, because I've never read, like you, I've never read those novels or anything like that, and obviously I think that most fans were okay with the way that basically the canon was reset when The Force Awakens was going to be released. I think overall people were like, well, there's this enormous body of work that was being produced in the wake of in the gap between the last film, between Return of the Jedi and then the prequels. People seem to have been more or less okay from that, as far as I can tell. But one thing I'm dimly aware of is that there seems to be a nice setup with regards to I think he's called Jason Solo in the novels, like Leia and Han's son. And I think he's the one who turns to the dark side there. So there is some of that continuity in terms of just the idea of Kylo Ren. I think there's just some of it interplays there with like how he turns and stuff. And I think, again, I'm speaking from pure ignorance, but this is just what I've always been left the impression of. I think actually Luke had a child as well, maybe a daughter. So I think part of me was thinking, is that maybe where Rey's come from? It not being a child of Luke Skywalker, but sort of going to have that similar lineage angle to her. I don't know, maybe from a former Jedi, maybe someone that Obi-Wan Kenobi knew or something like that. This is all pure speculation, but I'm just very curious. I would wonder how someone who's familiar with the extended universe novels would actually feel about this, what their actual sort of thoughts are.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, I don't think that Lucasfilm or anyone actually cares anymore about that stuff.
No, of course not.
We're doing our own path, I know that they've, in Star Wars Rebels, they've been referencing expanded universe stuff and taking bits and pieces from that.
Yeah.
But, as far as I can tell, they've just rewriting their canon from scratch with these ones. But
I'm not critical of that at all. I think that's fine. I think if you've got the authority to do that and you're confident in what you want to do, I think that's fine. But as thing, it is the impression that they're not actually that confident in what they're doing.
No. I mean, at least I do get the impression that before Rian Johnson came on, this film was going to play out very differently. because he did seem to come in and just rewrite the whole thing.
Who was the original? Was he not the original? I presume he was not the original director to be attached then.
Yeah, but they'd already started. I think they already had most of a script in place when he signed on that J.J. Abrams had worked on.
Yeah,
and their whole team. But I think at the point of release, Rian Johnson had sole writing credit on this film, which is the first time that's happened. So he must have significantly changed it from their outline for that to be the case. So we'll see how much of a job J.J. Abrams has to put it back on the course he wanted it in the next film. But let's see. I actually have a question for you in terms of this film. It's something that I found absolutely ridiculous, and I laughed when I saw it. But some people really like it, and they think it's a really beautiful moment. And that is Leia
in space.
And her Leia in space. Is her Mary Poppins moment.
I did see. I think I saw a comment. Someone said it was like it was her Sandra Bullock in Gravity moment. That was really dumb. Some people have said this. This is a comment that's come up a lot. It's not just for this, but other things over time. People go on about, well, Leia hasn't had Jedi training. How could she do this? When Han Solo was killed, how did she know that he died? It's like, well, the Force is strong in her family. I don't entirely, her having inexplicable sudden bursts of access to Force power. I'm actually okay with that because the Force isn't, sort of a neat thing that can just be sort of turned on and off. It's always there. It's always flowing through everything. And part of me kind of appreciated what they were trying to do in that bit. But yeah, it just, in terms of how it actually played out on screen in the story, I was just like, what is happening? What? Like people, oh God, I don't want to sound like a complete douche when I say this. They needed to kill Leia off better. In fact, they needed to kill her off. And because you want to be good to Carrie Fisher, but obviously you want to honour the legacy of Leia as well. It has to be a heroic death or something. Now, even if she died in that sequence, it wouldn't have been as a grand gesture, but I don't know. It would have been a nice poetic way to go, I think. But yeah, it just turned into just sort of sheer sort of it was just ludicrous to look at, even though it was like they didn't want to let her go. And that actually ties into one of my genuine things that I really wish they'd Rian Johnson had done differently was when Laura Dern dies by going to light speed into Snoke's ship. That should have been Leia. What a great way for her to leave the story. Just an enormously impressive, grandiose display of sort of sacrifice. And, I thought that was exactly the point where they could draw a line under, the loss of Carrie Fisher. They should have just said, even if it was already in the script and it was a late stage thing, they should have just said, we can do this. Peter Cushing was in Rogue One. They could have made that happen. I would have loved to have seen Leia go out in a blaze of glory like that, and that was an opportunity I felt was sorely missed.
I mean, they probably had enough footage of her that they could have cut something and just reworked it, replacing backgrounds and stuff like that. Stuff they could have done, but yeah, I don't know if I think there may have been a deliberate act to not change her story afterwards. I'm not sure why. But I think they wanted to give her, I think particularly because of the moment she shares with Luke at the end of the film, I think they still wanted that. Yeah. And it would have had a lot of reworking to not have that be the case. I didn't really like that moment, though. Because, it was very cool the thing where, all of the AT-ATs are... do you say AT-ATs or do you say AT-ATs? I've always said AT-ATs, but I think it's AT-AT, isn't it? No, I say AT-AT. Oh, you say I don't know. AT-AT. I don't know. Someone maybe in the comments will shout us for that. Again, it wasn't exactly the most impressive moment ever, but I like the moment where they're all firing at once on where Luke's standing and that, and then he sort of comes out of it. You saw it coming a mile off that was what was going to happen. But at the same time, the run up to that whole bit with him and Leia, it just didn't work for me.
it could have been cut. I felt it just didn't feel.
Yeah,
it just didn't work. It did not work for me at all. And then obviously the bit where he sort of winks at C-3PO, it's like.
See, I think that whole sequence maybe would have been more interesting if no one saw him but Leia. In a way,
yeah,
for that
absolutely,
bit.
yeah.
Because that if C-3PO didn't see him, I think would and didn't react. I think that if they were actually just communicating by the Force. But,
well, I mean, that's that almost like is like the end of Return of the Jedi. Where Luke sees his father and Obi-Wan and Yoda. That sort of I like that. I mean, that would have been cool if they'd done the Force Ghost bit there. But maybe even if like Leia hadn't realised he was a Force Ghost until like the very last moment or something, that would have been interesting. But that just sequence, it was just like, it's very, very strained.
Yeah, and the dice.
What? Yeah. What? Sorry, this is maybe my supreme ignorance and lack of attention span. But where do the dice come from?
Okay, so I mean, Luke finds them in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon when he goes in there,
right?
And it's a piece of something that's in that I didn't find this out until after I saw the film, but the dice are apparently in, I think, A New Hope.
Okay.
They were just a bit of set dressing that someone hung from one of the parts. It's just these little golden dice.
Right.
So I guess it was supposed to be a callback to that. But the problem being that it's one of those callbacks that no one knows about, really. Except for maybe people that are watching stuff shot by shot.
Yeah, like the most
films.
hardcore fans probably will well up on that. I literally thought, I was literally like, is this a plot point from Force Awakens that I missed? Is this like, I don't know, an engagement present Han Solo was meant to give to Leia before he ran off and then he could only give it to, I don't know. This is the thing, I was just like, did I miss, I don't remember this. This must be something important. This must be something meaningful. And it apparently was meaningful, but they just had to force that impression onto us, and then as you say, you had to find it out sort of after the fact. So again, I presume it's in the visual dictionary.
Probably.
I don't know. I feel a bit strange during this conversation actually, because since I saw the film, I've actually been like sort of feeling very positive about it, and I'm getting the sense of having had this conversation, the sort of cracks of began to show. It's like it's coming to the surface. Because I've not really had a change of heart or anything. I still enjoyed the film a lot. I had a good time. I don't regret going to see it in the cinema. But I think some people, because you know this from knowing me personally, that how enthused I was about Rogue One, how much I love that film. Rogue One, over time, I can recognise its faults. There are a lot of things wrong with it, but my feelings about it haven't changed. But I can start to feel The Last Jedi slipping away from me a bit. It's starting to crack. But I don't know if I'm going to hate it in the way a lot of like some people particularly really, really hate it. I don't think I'll ever sort of resent it in that way. I still prefer it to The Force Awakens. I still found it a far more satisfying experience than Force Awakens. But yeah, just the sort of clarity, the sort of clouds are parting a little bit. It's strange. Yeah. It's a very strange experience.
Because I think that the problem is the fact that it is a film that doesn't necessarily hold up to deep scrutiny. But I think that's for me where it really comes down to, I think it's a script that they should have spent more time on.
Yeah.
To really think about what they wanted to do with it. And the unfortunate thing with these films is that the turnaround in them is so quick that they probably already start on the sort of the post-production stuff before they've even written the script. You know, when they already know a few outline scenes, they already know they're going to go to this casino with a bunch of aliens, so they've already got to start work on the animatronics and start work on some of the CGI to get it all done in time for the final release. So when they've already spent, let's say, $20 million on animatronic monsters, they can't then cut the scene with those monsters in it.
Yeah.
So then becomes really restricted by everything else happening rather than just what would make a good movie. Like going back to the casino scene, the casino planet stuff. I personally thought it was, with the exception of the character development, was an entire waste of time. Didn't really make any sense. Felt a bit bungled, and that makes sense when you hear about what that sequence was supposed to be. and that's that the person they were going to find with the pin was supposed to be Lando.
Oh, wow.
And that really changes how everything could then play out from that point. That they go to the planet, they find Lando, they escape with him, and then he becomes part of this plot.
I think...
But it fell apart, apparently, when they did screen tests with him, or they would kind of gave him script to read. He's lost his mojo a bit, and they knew that it wasn't really going to work out, so they just had to rewrite the script to shoehorn in these other characters to make that all work.
Have you ever played Command and Conquer 3?
Yeah.
He's in that, isn't he? Billy D. Williams.
Is he?
Do you remember him in that? I'm sure it's CNC 3. He's like, it's a legendarily awful like performance. He's like one of the GDI heads. Oh man, you've got to look it up. There's some spectacular.
I'll have to.
But that's sort of what that's reminding me of. I mean, I wouldn't have liked that in terms of overloading it with characters from the original trilogy. I understand why it's not a bad idea, but at the same time, I just think that would have been a bit cheap as well. It's like, oh, okay, so it's someone else we know, rather than actually creating a new character who is interesting, you know.
But I didn't find the new character they created interesting, though.
Well, no, because he was basically the same character from Guardians of the Galaxy. Is the collect? I mean, it's Benicio del Toro.
Yeah.
My friend Matt Wisniewski, who's he does a series. He does another channel on movieblogger.com. He did a really good review of Last Jedi, and he made that point. It was just like he you know, essentially, are Disney trying to tie the Star Wars and Avengers universe together? They're trying to, like, the MCU's, they're part of the same continuity, so, you know, they're just going to try and do it through Benicio del Toro. So it's like, okay. They could have come up with, they could have just come up with a better new character. Which again, you know, there is some spark of that, because I say I liked Rose. She came out of nowhere as a character. I thought she was pretty good. I enjoyed her performance. Like, it was Kelly Marie Tran, I think her name is. I thought she was good in it. I am actually genuinely interested to see where she's going to go in the next film. The thing I'll say, though, is that I don't know is her and Finn actually going to be a thing? Is there a love interest general? Is there actually going to be a romance there? Because I'm
guessing so.
I don't know, because I really like John Boyega. I think he's great. I do actually. Finn, again, was one of the things I did like about The Force Awakens. But part of the reason I like him is because it's that implication of being this person who, you know, he was raised to be a stormtrooper. He's still learning. You know, I kind of like the idea that he's someone who may not even be able to be capable of romance, if that makes sense. That would be interesting to me if he's just sort of remote from it. So maybe that's where they're going to go. She's going to sort of help him with that. But in this film, in some ways, he actually seemed a bit too confident for me. If that makes sense. He sort of too aware. He
doesn't make sense as a character that should be ignorant of the universe outside of the First Order.
Yeah, exactly.
That as a character, he doesn't make sense from what they've set up as his origins. But that's the thing why I'm not really that much of a fan of Finn as a character, because I don't think he's very well conceived. I think they should have really... I
personally think he's well conceived in Force Awakens. I just don't think they know what to do with him anymore.
I mean, the idea of him, like, the concept of his character and his origins and how he then goes from there into the rest of the universe makes sense. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting. But then what they do with him after that point, I don't think is interesting. I don't think they've really used him. He's just, every now and then he knows a bit of information about the First Order. Other than that, he's... Yeah, I don't really know what to make of him as a character most of the time. Yeah. Sometimes he's really confident in like a kind of nerdy way where it's just sort of awkward confidence. But then it's almost like he knows things he shouldn't, like some of the social skill stuff he does. I know it sounds weird, but like asking Rey if she had a boyfriend in Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And that sort of insinuation is like, hey, you got a boyfriend? It's like, is that a universe of stuff? Would he know about boyfriends and girlfriends?
He doesn't even. He didn't have a name. Like he didn't really. He didn't have a real name. He had a designation, and now he's, you know, suddenly discovering girls. I don't know. Maybe I've underestimated how stormtroopers do things. I don't know. Maybe off the clock they go hog wild, but I don't know.
But yeah, in terms of Rose, my thing with Rose is I find I do generally like the character. I just don't think she got that much interesting stuff to do.
Yeah.
It's just the contrast between sort of good actress, bad writing for me. But I guess we'll see if they actually manage to think of a better thing to do with her in the next film. But she just felt like she was yet another character in the new version of this franchise to be the fan of what was and communicate that internal fanboyism to the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird with like Rey in Force Awakens was just like she was the fan of, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
She was the voice of the fan in the movie, and this Rose felt like she was the fan of the Rebels voice in the movie.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
But
I mean,
I want to bring something to you, which is something I thought about after the film. So obviously the way that the plot works out in terms of the Rebels and Finn and Rose and Poe, all of their stuff, it goes from they're being tracked by the Empire or the First Order, and they they conceive this plan to try and get away from the First Order, but they're not being told what's going on by Laura Dern's character, so they have to sort of figure out that plan and do it themselves, separate from Laura Dern, not tell her. And then there's the whole, and Poe being mutinous because he has no idea what's going on, and it seems like their new commander is just letting the ships, letting a lot of people die for no reason because she seems to not have a plan. And, Finn and Rose, they go off to find this codebreaker who ends up betraying them. But if you follow all of it back, if Laura Dern's character had told Poe the plan, it would have succeeded. Because they wouldn't have sent Poe and Rose on a random side mission to get a codebreaker who wouldn't have then told the First Order that there were tiny ships to look out for going to the planet. And it's for that, just that realization after seeing the film, maybe then just like that's the main reason why that whole bit just is absolutely pointless for me. I don't know if that was supposed to be deliberate or not.
No, I mean, that does that makes perfect sense. I mean, that genuinely does. I think, maybe I'm just being overly charitable here, but I think thematically the idea with that whole thing of being betrayed by the Collector from Guardians of the Galaxy was that it played in that whole thing about making mistakes, learning from failure. But that's a really sort of brute force way of doing it. It's a really, really sort of ham-fisted, club-footed way of doing it. It's, as you say, I mean, boil it down to the basic thing. There is no reason for Holdo to be keeping Poe out of the loop at all. Even without those sort of added extras you've just, pointed out, it's like, just from basic military strategy, you don't keep your senior officers in the dark. So,
but then when you're, it's just this whole, I guess, idea that the reason the Rebels failed in that was because their management are bad at communication. But so something I guess a lot of people in normal management work structures might be familiar with, of just bad communication makes work not go very well. And it's an interesting thing to bring into a Star Wars movie. That those things that people deal with in a normal workday. It's like, our boss isn't communicating this information we should know.
Yeah.
And that's a plot thread in a Star Wars movie now.
Poor management.
Okay, yeah. So, alright. Fair enough.
How did you feel about the whole thing about the weapons trading? Because I liked that, but again, it kind of felt either it was kind of superfluous, but if they'd developed it a little bit more, it might have been interesting.
Yeah, it felt like a very throwaway piece of information.
Yeah.
It's almost like, okay, so we're going to try and bring in sort of real-world weapons dealing politics into this Star Wars film. It just felt really unnecessary. It felt like it was one of those scenes I easily would have cut because I don't think it added anything to it,
It's almost a wink nod moment, isn't it? It's like, oh, we see what you did there. I mean, oh god, I really don't want to go into this, but it's just, I mean, obviously a big thing that came out since The Force Awakens was released was the whole do I want to say social justice angle? But all right, let's say cultural commentary angle. So I'm just wondering if that was like some attempt at that. I don't know.
As in the film commenting like on, so giving social commentary.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Is that something that you really think Star Wars has ever done? And if it has done it, has it ever done well? Because this is again, this goes back to my interest in, because in some ways, one thing I'm probably going to go forward look into more. I might do some stuff for Movie Blogger about it. Is I'm very curious about like the fan reaction, especially on social media and stuff, because obviously those people can get fucking crazy. And there's always this idea now that Star Wars, in fact, everything is trying to push some sort of social agenda, some sort of liberal biased agenda of things. So I'm just wondering if that's like, there must be someone who looked at that and thought, anti-military. It's like, I don't know, does this film actually, okay, what I'm basically trying to say is, does this film actually have anything to say? Would you sort of say that? Is there anything you could take from this as sort of like a thing where you're like, wow, that was an interesting idea I hadn't thought of before, or, this is really something that I could think about, because all Star Wars films do that to an extent. But do you reckon there's any sort of the message of Star Wars, of Last Jedi, is communicated in any way, even if it's just the sort of more obvious things about failure? Do you think it actually communicated anything well beyond just the story itself?
No, not particularly. It's, as I say about the whole, the lessons of failure felt like they were muddled because it was just, the reasons they failed felt really stupid and frustrating and just not very well written. The kind of, I don't know, any social commentary about the, as I say, with the kind of the weapons dealing stuff, it's just sort of, it's a very thinly veiled understanding of, like, surface understanding of that. It's almost just sort of like the college student being like, well, did you know that actually the British sell weapons to Saudi Arabia and they did it? It's like, yeah, okay. Like, yeah, that was in the news. I read that too.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Why are you mentioning it here?
Yeah, it's sort of like in the middle of a conversation about, spaceships. It's like, well, by the way. So, I don't know.
I think that's the sort of thing that science fiction can do very well. And I don't think just because Star Wars is, an air quote, a kid's film, it should be afraid to tackle sort of at least broader subjects. But if you are going to bring something up, it's like, okay, you've mentioned the fact that the rebels, or the resistance, or whatever we're calling them now, they actually have to buy their weapons too. What's your point? Yeah. Like, okay.
It's like, okay, there are some scumbag people just making money.
Yeah.
Aren't there always?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, that sort of thing has come up before. I mean, if you look at like the Hutt and stuff, Jabba did incredibly well against the sort of chaos on Tatooine and on the Outer Rim worlds and stuff. This was a guy, there are a lot of people, even Han Solo, a thief, a criminal, a pirate. He did very well out of things. The conflict, big and small, makes people a lot of money. So this is not, why mention it in this context? Why mention it in such a sort of throwaway fashion? If you actually wanted to explore that idea, explore it. There could have been, something you could have probably done with that quite interesting, but don't just sort of oh yeah, by the way, look, here's a hologram of an X-Wing next to a hologram of a TIE fighter. If you're going to have that sort of more social commentary element to it, do something with it. By all means, go there. But, because science fiction can be very good for that, but, I don't know.
As you say, I mean, if they develop that as a bigger part of the Finn Poe Rose storyline, if that had actually been the core of what was going on with those guys, rather than just faffing about for 40 minutes or had maybe an hour for whatever it was, it's an interesting nugget of an idea that just on its own doesn't really mean much because it's just a bit of window dressing essentially for the universe. But if they'd actually gone full bore into that as a concept for the plot, it might have been more interesting. But
I think
they didn't really go there.
As a comparison, it's actually it actually kind of chimes with one of my favourite parts of Rogue One. I have this thing, I'm sure everyone does, but it's the thing I tend to think about a lot, is my favourite little moments in a film. So it can be like even like a one line of dialogue, how an actor says it, or, you know, the look on their face or something. Just those little things appreciate me. And there was Cassian in Rogue One. Here's that bit where he talks about, you know, it's a very throwaway thing, but he talks about, you know, he's had to do terrible things for the rebellion. And it's a very small moment in the film. It's a very sort of slim part of his performance, but he communicated in that part so well to me that this is a man with a dark past. This is a man who's seen and done horrible things in what he sees as the greater good. That said a million more things to me than that entire little bit where they're talking about arms trading. That's how, if you want to introduce something as a snapshot, as a snippet, as a, you know, do something like that, actually write it into the character, write it into the performance, you know, get the actor to express it, and not just say, here's a picture of a TIE fighter, here's a picture of an X-Wing. Yeah. You know, there are ways you can do this sort of thing. That's the magic of filmmaking. You can communicate stuff like that incredibly well. So either just do it well or don't do it at all, or develop it. It's, you know, it's not hard.
Yeah, I think just as you were saying with that, how much it means, like that, him saying that, and then that added to the actions of when you first meet the character, that gives you a whole new depth to the rebellion as a whole, because they're saying, like, they're sending people on these kinds of missions. That adds a whole new angle to all of Star Wars. That influences the whole thing. But with this, it was just, I don't know, maybe if one of the characters in the movie was the arms dealer.
Yeah.
That you thought was a good person and then turned out they were playing both sides. That brings it down more to a character perspective rather than just, oh, by the way, holograms. Yeah,
that would have been great. Yeah. That would have been a really, really interesting approach. And it would have, again, justified the side quest.
So it's, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in this film. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff I could sit and pick apart. You know, like the magic tracker that can search through hyperspace. That's impossible, but actually, no, wait, I know where that is. Actually, like that kind of stuff. And I can project our hologram halfway across the galaxy, and I know how to link these two minds together when I don't know one of the people is. There's a lot of these elements throughout the film that just aren't very well thought out. And are, for me, big plot holes that I feel like for those types of things, you can forgive one or two, but then there are so many of them in this film with just these big leaps in logic that make a lot of the plot stuff fall apart. Like it ruins a lot of the experience for me. As much as there are interesting moments in the film and interesting ideas, it's not held together very well because they keep having these flimsy links to everything and flimsy explanations to everything.
And the thing is, they're not even that original in terms of plot points, because I mean they wouldn't be satisfying for someone who doesn't have because basically they reminded me of some very specific things from some other properties, but even if I hadn't had knowledge of those, they're still, as you say, not very satisfying. They are big like gaping holes in the sort of the film. But I mean, the whole thing about the lightspeed tracker and that was from the first proper episode of Battlestar Galactica, the remake series.
Yeah.
I think it was called 33, the episode where they were jumping, and then 33 minutes later, the Cylons would catch up with them. So we've seen that before.
Like, how are they tracking us?
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. There was a particular ship that was being tracked. So even if I hadn't been aware of that story of Battlestar Galactica, it's still, it would have been a very sort of conspicuous sort of pockmarking things. The whole thing about light speed, we've seen that like more recently in Star Trek Into Darkness. You know, something's happening in light speed or in hyperspace that's not supposed to happen. Well, that was in Into Darkness. They did that as well. So again, you've got a bad idea that you didn't even really come up with, or at least, you know, there's not so much justification in your story as being an idea you wanted to try out yourself.
Yeah.
It's strange. That genuinely stood. I say again, I did like this film. It's really strange to keep saying that, but that stuff like that did bother me. That was the sort of thing that really, that and Hux and a couple of other things, that stuff really sort of stuck in my paw. But yeah, but this is the thing. This is one reason why I was really interested, because I know how strongly you've said you felt about this one. This is one reason why I was really hopeful we could have this conversation. I'm really grateful for that, because this is a film that is worth talking about, at least. No matter how you feel about the film itself, this is a film worth analysing, worth sort of debating and stuff, because it's got its interesting sort of foibles and quirks and peculiarities in terms of itself just as a film, but also in the wider cultural context. There is a lot to chew on, and I do always appreciate that. That's one reason why I like watching sort of obscure films and talking about bad films and stuff, because the worst kind of film is the one that you have absolutely nothing to say about.
Yeah.
So we should be grateful for that, at least.
It's definitely sparked conversation.
Yes.
I can give it that.
Yeah. Just it would have been nice if it had been a much more cohesive film.
Yeah.
But, you know.
It would have been good if it was conversation that was more favourable towards it, rather than just complaining about it all the time and constantly thinking up new reasons to complain about it, which is the reason that my opinion of it has dropped. Every time I think about it, I come up with a new thing I don't like about it.
Well, I might actually be going be going to see it again soon, because a friend of mine is actually he's a much bigger Star Wars fan than me. I thought he would have seen it already, but he apparently hasn't, so I might actually be going to see it again soon. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, I mean, is there anything else you want to add, or do you want to sort of draw a line here, or?
Yeah, I think I guess like final thoughts with regards to this and a lot of fan reaction is, it's a shame that a lot of the conversations about this film so far have been generally, at least from what I've heard on the internet, that the reactions that people are focused on are either that people love it and think it's their favourite new Star Wars film, or people hate it for quite stupid reasons, like whiny fanboy reasons, rather than necessarily there being a real look at why are other people criticizing it, what are the genuine criticisms of this, rather than just those being like, it's a great film, the middle bit was a bit funny, but other than that, it's great. I think I wish there was the negative reactions like mine that I think are a bit more of problems with the filmmaking of the whole thing and the pacing and the script writing, rather than just like, it didn't do exactly what I wanted it to.
But that's a lot of the part of the conversation I'm really interested in, is just the absolute mania, especially with regards to Luke. So that's I think that says more about my personality than anything else. But I mean, I know people who've said that they actually think it's one of their favourite Star Wars films. I know at least one critic who I think actually said it is now his favourite, which again I can't agree with, because it's not even but yes, it's better than Force Awakens, it's better than the prequels, obviously, but Rogue One's still ahead of it for me. But yeah,
I don't think it even compares to the original trilogy.
No, I'd probably agree with that, because Rogue One is very high. I would probably still say that Empire is what I consider the best. It's certainly my favourite. I would actually, I know some people are going to get on me for this. Rogue One's probably at number 2 for me, with New Hope just behind it. Yeah, that's sort of where I was. I do actually, I am a big fan of Jedi, so I put Jedi under like Jedi,
Empire. So my order, if we're going to rank them,
let's do that.
Would be,
let's do that. So
for me, it's at the top to bottom is Empire, Jedi, A New Hope and Rogue One, switching positions one day to the next. I can never really decide, and then the rest of them.
The rest of them. The others.
I don't really.
Actually, Return of the Jedi was my favourite when I was a kid. And it wasn't just because of the Ewoks. It was because it was quite a few things. I don't know. I just found it more. I think because it was just a much more straightforward film compared to Empire, which was a bit more sort of story plot heavy for me, at least. But yeah, my ranking is pretty much. I know it's very dangerous making rankings, because they can, as you say, they can be sort of quite fluid. But for argument's sake, top to bottom, Empire, Rogue One, New Hope, Return of the Jedi, Last Jedi, Return of the Jedi, Last Jedi, Force Awakens, Revenge of the Sith, Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Actually, no, I don't know. Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith are the two that actually switch around for me.
Yeah, I can get that. I think both films have redeeming qualities, but I think there might be more redeeming qualities in Phantom Menace for me, in hindsight. Just, I mean, it's Darth Maul was awesome.
Yeah, that fight scene.
Qui-Gon Jinn was great.
Yeah.
The music is fantastic. It's like,
I think actually that's probably a good justification for slotting Phantom Menace in solidly above Revenge of the Sith. I just like Revenge of the Sith because it was darker.
It definitely. I mean, it's the opening sequence of that film was great, where they really went full Battlestar Galactica in the style it was going with that big space combat scene. I thought it was the style of it was pretty cool.
Yeah,
this is the war scene. Yeah, but yeah, I think. I mean, that's, I don't know. As a weird side note, the music in the prequels was something that was actually one of the highlights of those. There are some of the pieces of music in that are fantastic.
The one from the Darth Maul fight, is that Duel of the Fates? Is it called?
Yeah.
I think it's Duel of the Fates. Yeah, that is an epic piece of cinematic composition. That is a great part of the score.
Like, the music in the prequels was different to the original trilogy, but still memorable, still stuff you can hum. And like you mentioned that, and it's already playing in my head. I can already think of it. I can't remember any music from these two new films.
No, not
like anything original.
I mean, I can't really remember it through Rogue One either, but I don't think that matters as much because I just love that film. So.
I don't think it was trying as much with that.
No, that's the thing, though, isn't it? Again, you know, Rogue One is a different animal, which I guess we'll have to see what happens if the Han Solo film actually ever gets finished being made.
We'll see what that's like.
Oof.
But
okay, we'll do. Yeah. Okay, is that out this Christmas? Is that Han Solo?
I believe so. Yeah.
All right, so should we do this? Should we pencil in next late January next year for us to talk about the Han Solo film?
You're gonna make me go watch the Han Solo movie?
I presumed you would later. Anyway. Cultural event. It could be hilarious at the very least.
Yeah, but I guess final note.
Yeah.
When I came, as I said, I've sort of I've done midnight showings for the last 3 Star Wars films. I've been excited to see more Star Wars after each one. After seeing this film, I honestly don't care about the next episode.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I mean that's the thing.
Caring.
I think one reason why perhaps I actually enjoyed this film a lot more than, say, for example, you have, is because I actually went into it with quite low expectations. Because I love Rogue One so much, but I recognise it's obviously very different to what's been going on around it. And because I really didn't like The Force Awakens, I think I went in with low expectations. So I was actually genuinely pleasantly surprised each step, even with the stuff that I did think was kind of crappy or didn't work as well. I benefited from my low expectations going into this.
Unfortunately, I went in with a bunch of reviews saying it was the best Star Wars film ever. So that was my base.
That's why you should never believe in anything else. That's why you should never believe in anything. But anyway,
Star Wars lied to me all these years.
Well, that's what people are saying, though. Basically, it's the betrayal, the crying betrayal.
I'm just disappointed more than anything else at this point. I've lost my excitement for new Star Wars movies, except for if Gareth Evans does another one, then I'll be happy. But apart from that, I'm just not really that bothered anymore.
I kind of don't want him to, though. I'm so happy with what he gave me with Rogue One. I'm just like, don't. I
don't want a Rogue One sequel.
No, I'm just saying, like, I don't want
another interesting idea.
He's given me a perfect, a Star Wars film. I think is almost perfect. I want him. I want that to be my memory of his contribution to the canon, if that makes sense.
You want that preserved in carbonite?
Yes, I want Gareth Evans to be preserved in carbonite, making Rogue One, just holding the camera or holding the clapperboard on the last shot. But yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on. Do you want to tell people about where they can see your stuff? Because you've got your podcast and everything else.
Yeah. So I guess my official title now is producer for Taste My Game Face, which is a video game podcast with me and a group of other people. You can either find us Twitter at Taste My Game Face, Facebook same name, YouTube same name, and tastemygameface.com. if all of the stuff in all in one place. So if anyone wants to go and check out that stuff, that'd be really good. Please have a look.
It's a very cool broadcast. I don't get a lot of time to make as much time to spend on podcasts as I used to, but it is one I definitely check out. The 2017 episode, that was a real hoot, actually. But yeah, anyway, thanks everyone for listening or watching. This is us signing off. See you later.
Bye.